Have you ever assembled and installed a tree stand before? Guess what? Me neither. This is my first time, and it better be good because my wife's family, they're all a bunch of hunters, and tree stands are second nature to them. This is Jeff with Jeff Reviews for You. My channel is dedicated to reviewing mostly as seen on TV items. I look at some consumer gadgets, other household items. Once in a while, I do a little bit of a DIY just because I like to. If that interests you, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and click the bell below. That way you're notified every time I release a video just like this one. Now, let's unbox this muddy two-man tree stand that I purchased from Walmart for about $130. I hope it goes well. So I've just taken all the parts out of the box here of this muddy double tree stand, and I just set them aside, making sure I have everything. Well, all of the screws and bolts came in a bag, not labeled, so I just aligned them up by size because a lot of them are similar size, and you want to make sure you do not use the wrong bolt. All right, so now I'm setting up for step one, putting the foot stand, or the part you stand here, on the ladder. So I know that this is the right piece because it has these holes in the side here, and I'm going to have to use these to connect later, but that's the piece I want to use to connect. Now I picked up my bolts. So for quick reference, there are a total of 6 of these. This is the 2.5-inch bolt. We're ready to install it right here. Now I'm ready to tighten. I have 2 adjustable wrenches ready to go. Do the same thing on the other side, then move on to the next step. If you're having trouble figuring out which bolts go where, like this one right here says 1/4 inch by 2-inch hex bolt, and it says the letter D, what you can do is you can go back to the main direction page where your parts are outlined, and they're all labeled here, right? So D would be the 4th one, and I pick up a bolt and I measure it, and it should fit exactly where that goes. That way I know I'm using the correct one. This next step, we are actually putting the upper support gussets, and if you're having trouble figuring out which pipe to use because they're not all labeled, get the one that goes from right behind the foot stand to this first hole. I know I have that one because it reaches. The other ones are too big. All right, so this calls for 2 different size screws. The shorter of the 2 goes on the top. The longer of the 2 go down here into the ladder. So I have these support bars in, and right now they're just loose, okay? So I just put both of them in, put the bolt and nut on, and now I'm going to tighten them down, remembering not to over-tighten, just to get them snug. All right, now we're going to install our side seat supports, and I have them lined up here, and we're going back to the largest of the bolts that we have. There's only 4 left, and we're going to be using the last 4. So I just have this set up. You can see where it's just laying there, and the holes are down here, and I'm going to real quick put the bolts through on both sides through here. I put the bolt through and the nut on the outside. This installation is coming along. It's now time for us to do these back gussets here, and it goes from this hole here all the way up to here. Of course, we bolt from the outside. The bottom here, we'll use the smaller of the 2 bolts. I think this is letter A, and then the top we'll use these ones. These are new bolts. We haven't used these yet. These are letter E. Remember, use the corresponding front page to make sure you have the right bolts. So let's install. It was a little tricky because the nuts go on the bottom, so if you have a friend, your friend can hold them or turn it on its side. But this is what it looks like installing those back gussets set up, ready to go. Now we are going to get our seat tensioning bars. And I know they're my seat tensioning bars because on one side I have these open hole spaces here, and then I take these bolts, so the only kind that have this hex nut on the top, and then I'm actually going to thread this all the way in. Now it does come with a little hex driver, so just do that. This is the next step before threading these in, or I'm sorry, sliding these into the base of the seat. So make sure you put this all the way down. When you're done, that's what they should look like. Our next step will be to take our seat tensioner bar with the screw there, and we're going to fish it through here, through the middle, and then all the way to the end. This end is different because it just has a hole where we can access that screw. So let's fish it through right now. So now that it's through, we actually have to line up on this side. There's a bolt that goes through to make sure it's tight. So here's a little tip for you. When you're sliding this through, there's a hole here on this side. So you want to make sure that your pull is angled or sided the same way. So when you're sliding it all the way through, these will line up, because you can slide it through this way and then your holes don't line up. You have to take it out and do over again. So make sure you line up your holes before sliding it through. Putting in this bolt on this side and this side was by far the most difficult part of this install. I actually had to sit down, put my feet on that end, and just pull as hard as I could and finally slip it through. But that was pretty difficult, just so you know. You might have to use some leverage. Next step, we're going to be installing our seat. So make sure, if you need to tighten the tension on your actual seat, that you use the tensioning screws to make sure that's nice and taut. So now we're going to screw this in to the top. So, funny story. It's now time for me to put my bolts in through the top here. See this hole, there's two on the other side, and that screws the top of the seat to the frame. Well, it tells me to use the bolts that are size B, which happens to be the 1.5 inch long ones. Well, I went back and checked. I don't have any of those left. So that's interesting. I'm all out. So I went back and retraced all my steps, and I did not use any incorrect bolts as I went along, but I just don't have the ones I need. So I went to Lowe's and picked up a few more here, and now I'm going to install it. I tilted it up on its end here to get better leverage. So what I'm going to do here is just stick the bolts I have through this way, and then I'll tie them in with the nuts as well, and then tighten them in here. And this is what's holding the seat to the bar. Here you might notice that the piece actually goes underneath the bar. You'd think it would go on top for support, but the directions show it going underneath. Now I'm going to tighten these down, and then we're going to secure the seat. This next part, I'm going to try to show you two different angles. So we're going to secure this piece here through this hole to here. And so what we do is we have a size E bolt that comes up from underneath here. Then I have a plastic washer that goes on here. And now I'm going to put that up through here and tighten it on. I'll show it to you from the other direction. This is just that same thing from the different angles. So I put my bolt through here, and now I want to make sure I put on my plastic washer. I'm going to line it up with the hole. It's right about here. It's a little tight, so you have to pinch it, and then you put the nut right on here. Now you tighten down both sides. So the seat is fully attached, and it kind of worries me that there's no support here at the back. There's only bolts here, bolts at the top, and that's it. That makes me kind of nervous to even sit on that. We will go on. The next step is putting on our shooting rails, and there is a left and a right piece. So you got to make sure you correspond. This metal piece goes on the outside. So we stick another size B bolt through, which I'm glad I bought more, a little plastic washer, and then we're going to put the bolt. So this is that little plastic washer. And so that way this thing can move up and down. So let's install that. Now we put in the front bar to our shooting cover and then bolt that in. So we put it here, and then down at the bottom, and then bolt it in. There is a wrap that goes around this whole thing, but you can put that on after it's already installed. So here's our big bolt that we're using. We're just going to slide it right in here. Get the nut on the other end, and tighten it down. Same thing on both sides. Once all that's bolted in, you have this wrap that goes around. It's pretty easy, just Velcros around. I was a little disappointed with some of the craftsmanship. Can you see these seam lines? They're pretty rough. That was kind of frustrating, but all in all, it went on pretty easy. You just got to take your time, go around, wrapping around, and just Velcroing it together. So, tell me, what do you think so far of this tree stand? It's going together pretty nice. It was kind of annoying that I didn't have the correct bolts, but hey, we remedied that very quick. All right, so it's completely put together. So the install, I did not get it on video, but all I did is I took it over to the tree, I set it up, I walked it in close, and then I started ratcheting it down. So the kit came with one ratchet and a bunch of ropes, and my father-in-law helped me out with this, and he said, yeah, we don't use ropes, we just use ratchets. So I'm going to have ratchets that I had to secure it, and there's actually going to be some more that I'll secure it to. I just wanted you to know that. They also did have a harness system that comes for safety, so make sure you check that out too. Let's get back and see what it looks like installed. Well, there it is installed. You may notice the extra row here of the steps. I opted, instead of doing 16 feet, I only put it up 12 feet. That's as high as I really wanted it. Plus, that means I did not have to mess with this branch that's right here. I also didn't necessarily care for the ways they wanted you to secure it, so I put some ratchets right around here. And then, of course, there's the ratchet at the top that they provided. I'm going to put another one here, but they had some ropes and all sorts of things. So I just felt that this was more sturdy. Let's go up it and see from on top of our tree stand. Like I said, here's the ratchet that goes all the way around the tree, securing these teeth to the tree. That keeps you pretty safe. In this video, we set up, installed, put together, all that kind of stuff, a muddy two-man tree stand. I will say, the assembly part, absolutely, I could do that by myself. Putting it up, you definitely need a second person because one, you have to stabilize those legs, getting it all hooked together. It's very, very important. Pros and cons. One, it was pretty easy to put together. Yes, I was annoyed that all the bolts weren't there, or at least they weren't the correct ones. I don't really like the seat. Don't get me wrong. It's comfortable, but every other tree stand I've ever seen and or sat in, had a solid base that you put a cushion on so you know this is secure. This one is bolted in by like 8 bolts, and that's kind of crazy. 2, 4, 6 bolts, and that's kind of crazy, right? Because that to me is the point of weakness in this tree stand. Just my opinion. Maybe you have used tree stands like this before. I just never have seen it. So anyway, that was my review of the muddy tree stand that I purchased from Walmart. This is Jeff with Jeff Reviews for You. As always, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have a great day. And this is the view that we get from our tree stand. It is awesome. Perfect view of the field here. I really do appreciate that you stayed around for my entire review where I set up and installed a tree stand that I purchased from Walmart. And you know what? This review could not have been possible if it weren't for my Works chainsaw. Why is that, you ask? Good question. Well, that cherry tree, I had to lop off one of the branches just to get this tree stand up in the spot. I did a review of the Works chainsaw not that long ago. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link that review right up here, and I would love it if you would click on this link. And by the magic of the internet, when you click right here, I'm going to join you at that review. So go ahead, click it. It's safe. I promise.